So you guys wanted an update on the Mitsubishi Evo 5 that we've got. Obviously you haven't seen that on the channel for a long time. We've been concentrating on other cars. Here's the engine out of it. So this is a 2.37 stroker engine. It's obviously got the 4G64 crank, and the rest of the engine is a 4G63. We've got the long I-beam rods, CP pistons, etc. Basically the engine developed a oil pressure issue, I don't know, beginning of the year, something like that, and it's been sitting around since then. So started stripping it down, doing some investigation. Now obviously this is a Mitsubishi 4G63 oil pump. This is a genuine one from Mitsubishi itself, but you can see obviously you change some bits over for the balancer shaft delete. Now when you do these balancer shaft deletes, you run like a stubby delete like this, and the oil pump has no support on it, so they are prone to having issues with the oil pump, because you can see here these are the gears, and the gears have started to wear into the casing itself because of the side load obviously that's put on it by the Cambelt and the drivetrain. So yeah, we stripped it down and we've caught it just in time basically before it threw a rod out the block. These are known for like chucking rods on the 4G63 engines with low oil pressure issues, especially if you don't run like a baffled sump or anything and you go on track. But I thought we'd pull this out, and we're going to pull the head off it because the head's absolutely fine, and going to start rebuilding this bottom end. So we're going to strip it down, going to put a new crank in it, new oil pump, and everything else should be fine because we caught it just in time. So we've got new bearings for it, so I'm going to show you everything. Right, so this is the box of goodies we've got here. Obviously we've got the gasket and another Mitsubishi oil pump. So it's a genuine one again, brand new genuine oil pump, so hopefully we have no issues this time. So we've got brand new ACL race bearings as well. Everything's going to be measured out like before, and we've gone with ACL thrush washers as well just to complete the set. And the most important part about it is we're going to throw a new crank in it. So I ain't even looked at the crank on this car yet, and I don't even care. I'm going to put a new one in it anyway. So this is the crankshaft. You can see here, brand spanking new again, just like before. Pull that crank out. If we can refresh it or whatever, we will, but this one's going to go in it now just for quickness. So you're going to watch me again. If you ain't watched me tear one of these down in the past, I'm just going to probably time lapse most of it. So I'm going to strip this down now, going to pull the head off it, check everything over as well, obviously why it's apart. Hopefully shouldn't have any sort of problems. The engine was running nice. Basically we just had like a whirring noise from behind the pulley itself when it was running, and I knew that something wasn't right. We've done some oil pressure tests. Obviously the oil pressure was bad. Now the whirring noise, obviously we've got a trim plate clutch on this, so it don't help at all, especially with balance shaft deletes. You can see there's absolutely no wear on that. That was all replaced, so it's done no mileage at all. But the whirring noise was basically these gears were rubbing on the casing itself, and obviously when it does that, it starts to create friction and starts to create gaps between the gearings, and that just lowers the oil pressure to a point that it can damage the crank. So what we've done here, sumps all steel and everything, so we're going to tear it down, diagnose what the problem is, throw a new crank in it, rebuild it properly like we did before. And if you're interested in watching that, keep on watching. So you can see here on the gears as well, when it started to obviously wear on the side of the casings, it also started to throw swarf into the actual gears itself. So you can see they've sort of heated themselves up and damaged the gears. So it's a no-brainer to just replace the complete oil pump. Obviously once everything's apart, it's all going to be checked, inspected properly. You know how I do things. It's just an unfortunate error. It's an unfortunate problem that happens sometimes. You know, parts fail, brand new parts can fail. What can you do about it? So just take it on the chin and move on. So that's what we're going to do. You're going to watch me now take this apart and rebuild it again, bigger and better. So with the rocker cover off, you can see where we left it. You can see how clean it is. I've even got the markings here with a permanent marker where I've done up the head studs. Obviously in here we've got H11 head studs. We've got Kelford cams in here as well. And you can see there's no wear at all on the cam. So the oil pressure was good up in the head. We caught it nice and early. it's better to just replace this crank and bearings. You know, we know everything's 100% good then. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to crack these head bolts off in the opposite order till I've done them up. If you haven't watched the episodes where I built this engine, and obviously I've done the head and put the cams in, you know, I've done a few episodes back in last year, I think it's 2019, where I built this engine. Go back and watch that first and you'll see this being assembled. So now we're just going to start taking this apart nice and gently. We're going to leave the cams in there and just pop the head off of the studs. We've got the Cosworth head gasket on there still. It's done in no mileage. You can actually reuse it. It's literally ready to come off, so we're going to pull this off now. A little wobble. Right, there you go. So you just see me pull the head off the engine. You can see how clean inside the engine is still, like when we built it. You can see the importance as well of polishing up pistons. Where I've polished up the piston crowns, you can see there's hardly any carbon build up. Obviously this car was run for a little while, so there should be carbon build up on the pistons, but there absolutely isn't. And that massively helps over time because it doesn't raise compression, cause debt issues, etc. When you get a carbon build up on a piston, obviously you can cause compression issues over time. So you can see here, we're going to just strip down the engine. Like the head gasket's got no wear at all. Nothing's got any wear on it at all, as you expect from a fresh build. So we're going to spin it over now. I've just pulled the sump off. We're going to get the rods out, get the crank out, and start pulling this apart, cleaning out all the swarf out. So we're going to take everything off the block, whatever, and clean it up properly, put it in the engine cleaner, and get any sort of swarf that's in the engine, if there is any, air blast it out, thoroughly clean it so you can eat your food off it, and then we start rebuilding this again. Right, so I've just turned the engine over, got the sump off, drained all the sump out. There's a little bit of swarf in the sump, which is obviously not a good sign, but we're going to be rebuilding this bottom end with a new crank and bearings and everything anyway, so there's no problem there. So what we're going to do now is start deattaching these rods, obviously, check what the damage is to these bearings. I'm going to take the bearing bridge off now and get this crank out. So it's not going to take that long to do. Obviously we ain't got to do a full rebuild like we did on the last one. It's just basically a bottom end rebuild, refresh, clean everything up. So going to get on with getting that crank out now, compare the two side by side, the good one and the bad one, show the damage. So the rear main seal on these is a bit awkward actually, because when you've got it on the engine stand, you can see here you can't really get to these bolts down there. Obviously I've changed them for Allen heads, stainless ones. So as I've showed you before, the trick to separating these rods, don't fully take these bolts out. You know, take them 3/4 of the way out, because obviously they've got retaining lugs in here. And then just tap the bolt from the top. You can see now the rod is separated. Obviously don't damage these, use a rubber mallet or a copper mallet. And you can see there. Now the rod's separated and you can take the bolts out, otherwise you're going to end up damaging the rod. So now the cap is separated from the top of the rod. Take the ARP bolts out, or standard bolts, whatever you've got in there. And you can literally just take the cap then off the top of the crank. So you can see here we've got a bit more wear inside here as well. You can see there, this is the wear from the low oil pressure, and that's what's going to happen over time, and it's just going to end up destroying itself. So you can see here where we caught the main bearings quite early, so we haven't actually destroyed them yet, luckily. So there's not a ton of swarf inside the engine, as you can see here. You can see here some of the wear to the main bearings, just gone through to the copper, so you know there's a little bit of swarf in the engine. So we're just going to clean that all out. But you can see there's no damage to the bearing bridge. There's actually not that bad damage to the crank either. I just wanted to replace it just for good measure. You know I like to do things properly. You can see here the journals are actually pretty good still. There's no deep scoring or anything in them, but it's better to just replace the whole lot. Low oil pressure issues, cheap enough to get these cranks. I think they're about 400 quid. So here we go, that's the inside of the engine. Obviously the crank's out now. You can see the bearings have got some wear on them from the low oil pressure. You can see across all the bearings, all the main bearings, all the rod bearings. So you can see that obviously the oil pressure dropped because of that oil pump, and we have obviously the damage that we have. So you know, we're going to just pull it all apart, give it all a proper clean out, make sure all the oil weighs, or anything in here, if there's any swarf got into it, it's all going to be removed. Obviously remove the oil squirters, give this a deep clean, and then just assemble it. So we obviously got the new crank. So that's the crank that just come out of the car. I'll let you have a look over that in a minute. Right, so just got all the pistons and out, the girdle, all the bearings, everything's out now. So I'm just inspecting everything on the bench. Now you can see here, obviously the pistons are absolutely perfect still. There's no issues there. Obviously the rings and everything's been gapped on them. Just going to check the rods over. The main bearing girdle, you can see there's no scores, there's no marks or anything in there, so we're good to go with that again. Obviously the wear was just in the inside of the main bearings, as you just see in the last video. So we're going to measure everything up, obviously make sure everything's still in spec, and then get to putting this crank back in. The cross hatching and everything from the honing still inside the bores. There's no marks, no damage or anything, so we're good to go on the bores as well. So at least with the head, it's basically as fresh as the day that I put it onto the car. So you can see absolutely mint still, so that's going to save a lot of time. We don't have to do no valve train on the top end of the car. So you can see here, obviously this had a skim, as flat as you like, ready to go again. All the valves have been lapped in, a little bit of carbon build up obviously where it's been running, but this head needs no attention at all. So what I will do is I will take these cams out, and I'll take all the roller arms and everything out. Everything's going to get put into a parts cleaner, because obviously where swarf has gone through the engine, it might have made it to the top end. I haven't seen nothing in the top end, absolutely nothing in there, no shiny bits or whatever. But obviously we've got these Kelford cams in here, we don't want to damage these. You can see they're still mint still, so that's a good sign. So here's side by side the old Mitsubishi, genuine Mitsubishi oil pump. You can see here where you have to blank off for the balancer shaft deletes and put seals in and stuff. So that'd be done the same on this one, and you can see obviously I've took the gearing out of this so I could check it. You can see there's tons of wear inside. Like I said, there's even wear on the edge in here. So compare that to the fresh one. This is another, obviously a Mitsubishi item, and I don't know why they don't actually have Mitsubishi printed on it. Maybe they're manufactured by another company, but this is a new one to go on the car. Hopefully this one lasts a little bit longer this time. I was going to go for an ACL one maybe. You see I've marked up all the bolts so that everything's lined up properly. Right, so onto the crankshaft side of things now. So you can see this is the crankshaft that come out of the car. Obviously you know that this was a brand new 4G64 crankshaft with 100mm stroke, and this will allow us to run obviously a 2.37 stroke with the Manley I-beam rods that we've got. But we knew that the bearings were obviously going to be a little bit scored, a little bit worn, so we just went out and got a new crankshaft anyway, because you can see that this would need a 1/4 mil grind, and it's not recommended on these cars, especially on a high performance engine, to grind the crankshaft. It will take off the hardening process of the car. It's different if you're going to get it re-nitrided or re-hardened. You could do it, but don't do it to a crankshaft if you're not going to harden it. So what we've done is went out and got another Mitsubishi 4G64 crankshaft, so another genuine one, you can see there. And one's going to go into the car with nice fresh bearings. You see it's got a coating on it already. These are brand new, so they're easy enough to get now. They're cheap enough to get as well. 4G64 crankshaft, so you can easily make a stroker kit out of it. As I showed you as well, we're going to go to the ACL race bearings, stock size race bearings, obviously, because we've got the crankshaft, the stock size crankshaft. These will all be measured, and then make sure everything's in tolerance. So we've got standard sizes for them and standard sizes for the thrust washers as well. So everything's going to go back together nice and fresh, and hopefully we have no oil pressure issues this time. So what we're going to do on the next engine, we're going to put a cut-off into the ECU, because obviously we're running a Link G4 ECU in the car. So it's going to enable us, we're going to put a sensor that's going direct to the ECU. Anytime it gets any sort of low oil pressure, it's just going to cut off the engine. So as you know, we're running a twin disc clutch on this car, so I just went over all the clutch plates, just made sure there was no marks, no damage or anything to them, which there shouldn't be. They're absolutely brand new. You see we replaced them in the last episode. We've done both clutch plates and the floating plate in the middle. It's seen no heat at all. It's as fresh as when I put it in there. So this is ready to go again, so that's good. So basically, yeah, we are just swapping out the crank, doing the bearings, and everything should go back together nicely. The major rebuild was done in the last episodes. Right, there you go. So you've seen the engine get stripped down now. Now you can see what's inside it. Obviously, if you're new to the channel, this is a 2.37 stroker engine. You've got the long Manley turbo tough I-beam rods. And you've got the CP pistons in a 9:1 compression. We've got the Cosworth H11 head studs, Cosworth gasket, and we've got the 4G64 crank. And we're going to get to cleaning all this stuff up now, to getting ready for the new crankshaft. So now you know why the Evo's not been on the channel. Wanted to get obviously some dyno runs and some road mapping of that. It's a link G4 ECU on that, and it would have been nice and fun to get that on the channel. So if you're looking forward to this engine being rebuilt, I love rebuilding engines anyway, so it's absolutely no problem. I know a lot of people will be like, oh god, got to rebuild the engine again, but there's no problem here. We've got all the parts to do it, and I love rebuilding engines. You know, it's just artwork, what you do, you know, the clearances and everything, how small they've got to be. When little issues like this happen and you end up having to rebuild it again, it does get you down after a while. That's why I took a little bit more time, just took a little bit of a break from it, but now we've got a little bit of spare time. I'm going to get this back together and have some fun with it, get it mapped, make some power. Good spec car, good spec engine, nice big turbo, FP black turbo on it. So join me in the future episodes where I'll be rebuilding this.